Unforgivable. The tragic tale of Air Algérie Flight 6289. The sun rose over Tamanrasset, a bustling town in southern Algeria, painting the Sahara Desert in hues of gold and amber. It was a calm morning on March 6, 2003, as passengers boarded Air Algérie Flight 6289, a Boeing 737-200, bound for Algiers. Families hugged their loved ones goodbye, friends exchanged smiles, and the crew prepared for what was supposed to be another routine flight. Yet, no one could have foreseen the tragedy that lay ahead. A tragedy rooted in negligence, human error, and a disregard for moral responsibility. The plane was filled with a mix of locals and tourists, carrying hopes, dreams, and stories. Among them was Fatima, a mother of two returning to Algiers to reunite with her children after a long work trip. Beside her sat Ahmed, a young engineering student excited to visit his family. In the cockpit, Captain Mohammed and First Officer Karim prepared for takeoff. As the engines roared to life, a slight unease filled the cabin. A mechanic had noted issues with one of the engines the previous week, but the airline had deemed it manageable. After all, replacing or thoroughly repairing the engine would have cost money and delayed flights, an inconvenience to profits. The plane accelerated down the runway, but moments after takeoff, disaster struck. The left engine failed catastrophically, sending the aircraft into an uncontrollable tilt. Panic spread through the cabin as passengers clung to their seats. The plane struggled to stay airborne for mere moments before it crashed near the runway, engulfed in flames. Of the 103 people on board, only one passenger survived, a young girl named Layla, who miraculously escaped the inferno. Rescue teams arrived quickly, but the scene was harrowing. Families awaited news, their worst fears realized as the names of victims were announced. The investigation that followed uncovered a series of failures. The left engine had not been properly maintained despite clear warnings. The airline had cut corners, prioritizing cost savings over safety. The maintenance crew, aware of the engine's deteriorating condition, had chosen not to push back against management's insistence to keep the aircraft operational. The tragedy of Flight 6289 was not just a tale of technical failure. It was a moral failure. The lives lost were the result of greed, negligence, and a collective disregard for the value of human life. Among the grieving families was Amina, Fatima's sister, who had raised Fatima's children during her absence. When Amina learned of the airline's negligence, her grief turned into anger. She refused to let her sister's death be reduced to a statistic. With the support of other families, Amina began a campaign to demand accountability. She reached out to journalists, lawyers, and advocacy groups. Her relentless efforts brought the airline's practices into the spotlight. Articles detailed how safety inspections were rushed, how employees were pressured to prioritize schedules over repairs, and how lives were considered secondary to profit margins. Amina's fight was not easy. The airline's executives denied responsibility, blaming the accident on unforeseen technical issues. They hired lawyers to deflect blame and protect their reputation. But Amina was resolute. "The lives lost on Flight 6289 cannot be forgotten," she said in a public statement. "This is not just about my sister. This is about ensuring no other family endures this pain." Her efforts led to a court case. Survivors and whistleblowers came forward, providing damning evidence against the airline. Maintenance workers confessed they were ordered to overlook safety protocols. Former employees revealed the company's history of cutting corners to save money. As the sole survivor, Layla became a symbol of hope and resilience. Though she was only a child, her voice carried weight. In interviews, she spoke about the passengers she had met on the flight, humanizing the victims. "I remember the kind woman who gave me her window seat," she said. "I remember the young man who said he was excited to see his family. They were good people, and they didn't deserve to die." Layla's words resonated with the public. Her bravery in sharing her story inspired many to support the campaign for justice. Donations poured in to help the families and fund the legal battle. The court case became a turning point. The judge ruled in favor of the victims' families, holding the airline accountable for gross negligence. Executives were fined and barred from operating in the aviation industry. New regulations were introduced, mandating stricter maintenance protocols and harsher penalties for safety violations. But the story did not end with legal victory. The tragedy of Flight 6289 became a case study in ethics, taught in universities and aviation schools worldwide. It served as a stark reminder that human lives are not expendable, that profit should never come before safety, and that silence in the face of wrongdoing is complicity. Years later, Amina reflected on the journey. Though she had achieved justice for her sister, the pain of loss never truly faded. Yet, she took solace in knowing that her fight had saved countless lives. Airlines around the world improved their safety standards, spurred by the lessons learned from Flight 6289. Layla grew up to become an aviation safety advocate, dedicating her life to ensuring no other child would endure what she had. In her speeches, she often quoted her mother's words, "The value of a life is immeasurable. Never forget that." The tragedy of Air Algérie Flight 6289 was unforgivable, but it was not in vain. It exposed the consequences of moral failure and inspired a movement for change. It taught the world that ethics and accountability are not optional. They are essential, and in the end, the story of Flight 6289 was not just about loss. It was a story of courage, resilience, and the power of ordinary people to demand justice. It was a reminder that every decision we make has consequences, and that the true measure of humanity lies in valuing the lives of others above all else.